Hey everyone, welcome to Title Scoop, Indiana specific. And this week we are finishing up our series on dead people. So today we're going to go over non-probate transfers, and with that we're going to get started. So affidavits for transferring property that are non-probate are devolution affidavits, heirship affidavits, affidavits following a transfer on death deed, and survivorship affidavits. So we're going to go over each of those and kind of what the requirements are if we see them or being requested to rely on them. So the devolution affidavit is the newest affidavit, and it started, I believe, in 2019. Now, it's similar to the small estate affidavit and the traditional heirship affidavit, but it's governed by IC 291723. I love this statute, and I know that's a silly thing to say, but I love it because it really spells everything out. So I pulled it for you, and I love it because when an attorney asks me if I've said, let's just use a devolution affidavit, that will be the easiest, they don't want to do probate, I can give them the statute, and it tells specifically what they need to include in their affidavit. So we need the decedent's name and date of death. We need a statement of the affiant's relationship to the decedent. We need a description of how the deeds or other instrument vested in the decedent and ownership or leasehold interest in the real property. So we're just going to spell out how that person was in title and how they came into title. We need the legal description of the property. We need the names of all the distributees known to the affiant, and then an explanation of how the property passed after the decedent's death to each distributee. So that can either be by intestate succession. So say dad dies and mom and two kids are still alive. We can spell out intestate succession states mom gets 50 and the kids each get 25. Or if they did admit a probate or admit the will to probate, we can follow what the will states. So again, you're just going to spell it out because we need it really clear on the record who is going to be holding that property. If there's fractional interest, spell those out as well because we need to make sure they're calculated to 100% if in fact that's what they owned. So it's just some additional information. We're going to present this to the auditor for transfer, but then we're also going to record it in the county where the property is. I know that seems silly and basic, but I do get that question quite a lot. And it's usually because they may have multiple properties. I'm not necessarily opposed to them having multiple properties if they spell it out very, very clearly, but it does need to get recorded in each county just so that way the property can be transferred accordingly. And again, we usually want on this, the timing to be we want to wait 7 months. If that you are being asked to use this prior to 7 months, give me a call. We can sometimes do it, but we're just going to have to do some extra steps to make sure that we can in fact close before the 7 month. And that's really because of creditors' rights. We want to make sure that everybody's been accounted for. Medicaid, things like that have not been discounted. All right, so the heirship affidavit. So this is usually used when there's been no formal estate filed, no will around, and there's not going to be a probate. And we get this request all the time, and it's definitely something we can use. It's changed a little bit with time. And in fact, I'm going to go to this next slide because the old statute was actually revised and now recommends that you follow the devolution affidavit statute. So I usually tell people if they're going to use an heirship affidavit, make sure you include all the information that the devolution statute states, just so that way you don't have any issues moving forward. But as with the devolution and the heirship, I tell people anytime someone dies and we're using a non-probate transfer, confirm in their obituary or grave websites or death certificate the relationships. It's not uncommon for us to see an heirship affidavit filed and then they're like, hey, we're selling the property and it's just us two. And then you look at the obituary and you see there's actually 7 other relatives and they're like, oh, right, dad didn't like them, or, oh, we haven't talked to them in years. It doesn't matter. They're still an heir that they don't get to get, the brother doesn't get to get rid of them on his own. So if there is controversy over that, say they are like, no, I don't think that, my brother can sign, whatever the case may be, we may in fact require a petition to determine heirship because we don't want to determine that on our own if they're not in agreement. An heirship affidavit really should be when it's really cut and dry and everybody's in agreement and going to sign. So if it's prior to 7 months, same as the devolution, get underwriter approval. And again, we can do it often as long as it's not like the day after, but we can usually come up with a solution to get it done prior to the 7 months. We just may need some extra things signed and a little bit more information. All right. So an affidavit following a transfer on death deed. So if we have a transfer on death deed recorded prior to the death, I say prior to the death, and this is really important because I had one recently. The person signed on a Thursday. The attorney intended to record it on Friday, but unfortunately didn't get it there until Monday. The person passed away over the weekend. The attorney wanted us to rely on it and we refused because the statute's really, really clear. And in fact, there's case law out there that if the person dies before that transfer on death deed is recorded, it is void. So we could not rely on it no matter what, even though they signed it prior to. So when we have a transfer on death deed and the person has passed away and it was recorded prior to their death, we usually want to file an affidavit following the transfer on death deed that kind of just spells it out. We cross-reference what the transfer on death deed was. We put the name of the owner, transferor, and his date of death. And then we want to put any information concerning the prior date of death of a spouse or joint tenant, because we want to spell out to make sure it's very clear why the new individuals are now in title. And then we want to name the beneficiaries, and that's going to be obviously spelled out in the transfer on death deed, but we want to make sure we name them in this affidavit to make sure it's clear to the county. We usually don't want to do this prior to 5 months. And again, it's creditors' rights. If you guys get asked to do it prior to 5 months, give us a call. Sometimes we are able to do it, but we just want to make sure that we have, like I said, additional information. We might need some additional documents signed, and we may be asking more questions. All right, survivorship affidavits. These are just a best practice. Not every county requires them, but I suggest them as a best practice because it keeps the chain of title a lot clearer. So if you have someone who's a life estate holder, a joint tenant, a tenant by the entirety, and the other person passes away, a survivorship affidavit just lets everyone know, hey, I was a joint tenant with this person, they passed away, so now I'm the owner. And really, that's what you're putting in this affidavit. You're going to cross-reference the original deed, how you held title with this person, the name of the individual and their date of death, and then basically a statement describing how the property is now held by the remaining individuals or individual. So there's no waiting period on this because this is considered a non-probate transfer, and it is, and they're not subject to creditors' rights. So statutes actually specifically state that. All right. Last but not least, the electronic record registry. This started in 2019. I actually looked at the website. If you guys want it, let me know if you haven't looked at it. It is pretty searchable. You can find the stuff, and there's a lot of information on there. I haven't dug really deep because it's not something that I need to use, but it may be helpful to you, or you may just be curious. It's really just a registry that was established to manage electronic documents. So we've got wills, trusts, powers of attorney, and it just helps keep it all in one place. I would love feedback on whether you guys find this useful for if you ever use it. Like I said, I literally went to it today for the first time, but just curious if you guys use that when you do have information or a party who maybe has an electronic will. So let me know on that. All right, with that, guys, we're going to call it a week. This is the last of the Dead People series. So let me know if there's another topic. If not, I'll come up with one, and hopefully we can do another one next month. With that, we'll call it a day and have a great week.